So I don't understand why this wasn't just enabled from the start, especially in an audio editing software. So you got your Mac, you just installed Logic, you can't wait to open your first project and start writing some symphonic metalcore jazz when you think to yourself, because you're a sensible musician, I wonder if Logic is set up ready to go out of the box. Well, kind of, but not really. But don't worry, I'm going to show you my top options settings that I would change inside of Logic, especially if you're new to using the software. I'm Elliot from Thornhill Audio Works. Let's jump straight in. So the first thing to do is to enable the complete feature set inside of Logic. So if you look in the top right hand corner, you can see that it says simplified mode. You don't want it in simplified mode. So if you click simplified mode, or alternatively, come up to the top left where it says Logic Pro and then go to Settings and Advanced. Here you can see you can click to enable the complete feature set. And when you do, look how many more options and settings become available to you. I always recommend to just turn this on from the start and forget about simplified mode and just assume that this is how the software is meant to be. Because it is. On to the next one. So the next tip is to make sure that the track and region selection options are engaged. Let me show you what I mean. So if you come back to the top left of your screen and go Logic Pro, Settings and General, and then tab over from Project Handling to Editing. Now you want to make sure that Select Regions on Track Selection and Select Tracks on Region Selection are both engaged. So what this does is ensures that when you select a track, all of the regions inside that track are selected, and likewise, when you select a region, that track is selected. So I've just found that over the years of using Logic, that these two options turned on make for a much simpler, more linear workflow. It means I'm not getting confused if I've got a massive project and all these tracks and regions, that when I select this region, I know I'm on this track, and vice versa. On to the next one. So next is the fade tool. So if we go back to where we were with Logic Pro, Settings and General, and just down from where we're selecting the regions and track selections, you should see Fade Tool, Click Zones. So here we have this lovely bell sound. With the fade tool enabled, if we hover in the top left hand corner, we can add in a fade in. And if we hover in the top right hand section, we can add a fade out. And if we had two tracks next to each other, you can select them both, and in the top corner that joins them, you can pull out a crossfade. And then on top of that, you can add back in your fade in and fade out. And if you really wanted to, you can right click these and change it to speed up and slow down. So I don't understand why this wasn't just enabled from the start, especially in an audio editing software. If you have the ability to apply a fade in, a fade out and a crossfade, if you can do that without having to change the tools each time and speed up your workflow, why would you not just have that be the standard way it works and turn it off is the option? I don't get it. So next you want to come to Logic, Settings, and this time go to Audio. Now this is where you can select your audio interface and your buffer size. So an audio interface is something like this. It's simply a way of plugging in microphones and instruments to get sound into your computer, and then using headphones or speakers to get sound out from your computer. So if you haven't got something like this, it's well worth getting, but in the meantime you can always use the headphone port or speakers built into your Mac. So buffer size is something we're going to come to a bit more detail in a different video, but the rule of thumb typically is to have it as low as possible, especially when recording, and if you start getting problems like this, simply increase the buffer size until the problem goes away. On to the next one. So your transport bar is kind of like the eye of Sauron for your Logic project. It controls all the navigational things as well as gives you all the information you might need for your project. So at the top of every project, you're going to have this bar here. Now if we click this little drop down menu and go to Customize Control Bar and Display, you can customize all the different shortcuts and menus that you have available to you, and in display you can change this to show whatever you want it to. So I'd highly recommend having the MIDI activity in and out enabled, as when you're using a MIDI controller it shows the different notes you're playing and it gives a bit of a guide to where you are. I'd also recommend turning on the quick help. So quick help lives in this top left hand corner and there's this little question mark here. All it does is gives a brief description of whatever your cursor is hovered over. So if I hover over this region, it tells me about audio regions. If I hover over the record button, it shows what the record button is, as well as the shortcut for it. It's just really useful if you're trying to find a specific tool or feature that you can hover over it and it can tell you if you found it. Once you've selected all of these, you can go to Save as Default, and that way they will appear at the top of every single project. So next we have the snap feature, which is inside of the project that you open. So if we come to the top here, you can see it says snap, and in this drop down you can have it set to either absolute value or relative value. Now I prefer the absolute value, and this is why. So I've dragged in these audio regions, and as you can see they look like they're perfectly lined up to bar 3. If we zoom in, you can see that they're not. So you might think, oh okay, well I'll just drag them back to the next bar and that way they'll all reline up. However, Logic remembers the original positional information. So even if you move it to a new bar, Logic will place it in the same position just at that new bar. So if we change this to absolute value, you're telling Logic, no, I want this to be moved to the nearest beat or bar and to have it lined up perfectly with that. So I've always found that it's really useful to try and keep things snapped to the grid as best you can, as it helps when you're trying to deal with timings and putting things in phase alignment and all those kind of things. Just keep in mind that Logic doesn't remember that this option changes, and therefore every time you open a new project you will have to change this feature, unless... So a template is when you've gone through Logic and you've changed the snap settings, I want this drum sound, this guitar sound, and these options enabled, etc, etc. So if you come to File and Save as Template, you can save a project with all these options and settings changed. That way, when you open up Logic Pro, you can simply select the template that you want and you're ready to start making some music. So hopefully you guys have found that useful. Now I know options and settings aren't the most glamorous side of making music, but hopefully you're going to spend a little bit of time going through some of them to make sure Logic works exactly how you want it to, meaning it's quicker to make your music. Now this is the first in a series of videos I'm doing, taking you from opening your first project right the way through to a mixed and mastered track. I'm going to share everything that I do with you guys and give you access to all of the files so you can mix and learn along with me. Like and subscribe and all that nonsense, and I'll see you in the next one.